What's up guys, Lon here from Android Authority, and this is the Honor 6X. This is the latest affordable mid-range smartphone from Huawei's Honor line, and it's the successor to last year's Honor 5X. For better or worse, it shares some similarities to the 5X, but they've made quite a few hardware improvements and refined the design to make this phone an even better bargain. It still retains the composite metal design from last year, which means there is metal on this phone, but it's not entirely wrapped in metal, nor is it a unibody design. The backplate is made of metal, which is surrounded by plastic windows on the top and bottom to help with antenna reception, and because the metal doesn't wrap around to the front, you'll find a plastic frame that goes around the outer edges of the glass instead. It doesn't feel quite as high quality or premium as a fully unibody metal smartphone, but the build quality is still pretty top notch, and there isn't much you can really complain about considering the phone's price. Huawei has also given the Honor 6X a much curvier design. The backside tapers down along the edges, and the corners have been rounded off to allow this phone to sit much more comfortably in the hand. The buttons and ports are all in pretty typical locations. The left side houses the power and volume keys, and they're both pretty easy to reach, but they aren't very tactile and don't provide a very satisfying click. It does indeed have a headphone jack which lives up top, and on the right side is the SIM card tray that supports dual SIM or a micro SD card in the second SIM slot if you'd rather have that expandable storage. On the bottom is a micro USB port, so there's no USB Type-C here, which is kind of unfortunate considering how many phones made the leap to USB Type-C this year, but if you haven't transitioned to USB-C yet, then this may not be that big of an issue. Flanking the micro USB port are two speaker grills, with one being a microphone and the other being the actual speaker itself. Like all single bottom firing speakers, it's very easy to muffle with your hand when using the phone in landscape, and I actually found this speaker to be a lot quieter than most other phones that I've used with single speakers. The other unfortunate part about the Honor 6X, aside from the weak speaker, is the lack of NFC. This means no tap to transfer or using mobile payment services like Android Pay, so if you use those type of services on your smartphone, you're simply out of luck with the 6X. Around the back is the fingerprint sensor sitting right below the camera, and in my experience the fingerprint sensor has been great. It's very accurate and fast to unlock, and I rarely ran into issues with it misreading my fingerprint. I would even go as far as saying that it's just as good as a lot of other fingerprint sensors found on flagship smartphones. The fingerprint sensor can also be used to take photos or videos, answer phone calls, stop alarms, and bring down the notification shade by swiping down, or browse through photos in your gallery by swiping left to right, which are all pretty helpful in making this phone easy to use in one hand. Switching to the front of the phone, you've got a 5.5-inch LCD display with 1080p resolution, and overall it's a fine display. It's plenty sharp and gets bright enough to comfortably see outdoors, but the colors are pretty washed out, which is my only real gripe with this screen. It's still perfectly usable, and the large size still provides for a good experience with browsing the web, playing games, or watching YouTube, and considering this is a rather inexpensive smartphone, the flaws on this display are much more easily forgivable. Powering the Honor 6X is 3GB of RAM with Huawei's own in-house chip, the Kirin 655. It's a pretty significant upgrade over last year's 5X, both in terms of RAM and processor, and performance is plenty good for a mid-range phone. It's fluid and responsive in regular everyday use and has no problems running graphically demanding games with smooth frame rates. I would say performance is probably one of its biggest strengths, especially when you consider the price to performance ratio. Another strong point for the Honor 6X is battery life. It's a very respectable size at 3,340 mAh, and it's even bigger than some batteries we've seen in current 2016 flagships. Huawei claims that the Honor 6X can last a little over 2 days with regular usage and 1.5 days with heavy usage, which is a really bold claim, and while I never hit the 2-day mark with this phone, I did get 1.5 days pretty consistently, or at least close to it. I do play a lot of games and watch a fair amount of YouTube on my phone, which does qualify as heavy usage, so it does look like the Honor 6X's battery life is living up to its promise, and a phone's battery life living up to a manufacturer's claim isn't something you can say for very many smartphones, so I have to say I've been pretty impressed with this phone's battery life. It sips very little power when on standby, which has a lot to do with the Kirin 655's efficiency, but even with constant use, this phone can still last a long time. I would usually end the day with at least 50% battery life left, and it was a pretty nice feeling to only have to recharge this phone every other day instead of every day. Even if I did charge this phone every night, I was always comfortably making it through the entire day and never found myself frantically searching for a charger. We've seen a lot of phones come out within the last year with dual cameras, but we've yet to see a dual camera setup on a more affordable smartphone until now, and Huawei claims that the Honor 6X is the first dual camera smartphone in its price bracket. Every dual camera smartphone uses its second camera a little bit differently, and in the case of the Honor 6X, you have a 12 megapixel primary camera and a 2 megapixel secondary sensor. The 2 megapixel sensor is used purely for capturing depth information, which can be taken advantage of when using the camera's wide aperture mode. The wide aperture mode lets you dial in the aperture from f16 down to as wide as f.95 for a very large bokeh effect. While changing the quote-unquote aperture does give you more or less depth of field, it doesn't allow for more light to enter the camera, so it's not a true aperture change in that sense of the word, but the bokeh effect does work quite well and looks very convincing. You're also not tied to the original settings and focus point and can change these after the fact to any image taken in this mode, but for best results it's better to keep the focus point on subjects in the foreground, as switching the focus point to subjects in the background can make the bokeh effect look a little artificial. The rest of the camera app is pretty easy to navigate. Swiping to the left takes you to the general camera settings, and swiping to the right will give you access to a good selection of different shooting modes, including a beauty mode, night shot, manual mode, and a mode for scanning documents. The overall camera experience has been quite impressive. It's fast to focus and capture photos, and the photos are surprisingly very pleasant, especially for a mid-range phone. The photos have great color, are well detailed, and does a great job with balancing highlights and shadows, which I didn't expect on a phone of this caliber. It also performs fairly well in low light. Highlights are mostly kept in check, with only a few rare occasions where they would appear overly bloomy or overexposed. It's only in the worst of low light situations does the camera completely fall apart, but most low light shots are perfectly usable with a fair amount of detail and noise being kept to a minimum. With the software, you're looking at Huawei's usual Emotion UI skin that currently sits on top of Android 6.0 Marshmallow, although an update to Nougat is supposedly coming soon. It's very bright, colorful, somewhat cartoonish, and everything else that you normally expect from Emotion UI, like transparency effects and the lack of an app drawer. The notification panel is still split into two tabs, with one for notifications and the other for toggles, which doesn't feel as easy to use as stock Android, and when you have a long list of notifications, it becomes nearly impossible to swipe over to the quick toggles panel without accidentally clearing out your notifications. For an unlocked phone, it also comes with quite a few bloatware applications pre-installed, like Booking.com, CNN, TripAdvisor, News Republic, and Lyft. If you're used to Emotion UI, then this will all feel very familiar, but it may not be an experience that you'll enjoy if you prefer something closer to stock Android. If you're considering picking up an Honor 6X, it's going to put a very small dent in your wallet. It's going for $249.99 unlocked, which is low enough of a price that it doesn't step on the toes of even the most budgeted flagships like the OnePlus 3T, the Axon 7, or even Huawei's own Honor 8, because those are battles that this phone simply cannot win. The Honor 6X knows exactly what it's meant to be, and it's a smartphone package that offers a lot without asking a lot. With dual cameras, a long-lasting battery, an excellent fingerprint sensor, and an asking price of only $250, the Honor 6X is going to be one of the most competitive phones that you'll be able to find in this particular price bracket. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Honor 6X. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below, and also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already, and make sure to check us out on social media: Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Google+, all that good stuff will be linked down below, and feel free to follow me on social media as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. Keep tuned here to Android Authority, because we are your source for all things Android.